All right, Paul, thank you so much for joining us today. It's our 2023 Ignite HR Summit, where we get to bring some pretty incredible people together and help business leaders out there, HR leaders, help take some really good tools back to their business and make some good choices and further their business. So we're super excited to have you here with us today. It was funny, I was just telling Paul when his book first came out of the phrases, 2,600 phrases for performance management. And I remember holding that book in my hand as a manager of hundreds of people and utilizing that tool. So again, thank you for your help in my career.
Best endorsement I could get, Elena. So thank you. My pleasure.
Paul Falcone, for those of you that don't know, is former chief HR officer, of Nickelodeon, head of international human resources for Paramount Pictures. He's held senior level HR positions with NBC Universal, Time Warner, and the City of Hope. He's also a columnist for SHRM, so Society of Human Resource Management, for those of you that are not the HR hat, and is the author of 17 books published by HarperCollins Leadership and the American Management Association. Today, Paul is the principal of Paul Falcone Workplace Leadership Consulting, where he specializes in management training, executive coaching, HR advisory services as well. He's a long-term instructor in UCLA Extension's School of Business and Management. I think most people know what UCLA is. Very familiar with all of that.
That's good.
And you have a lot of experience in union, nonprofit, and international HR environments. So you come with such a diverse and wealth of knowledge. We are certainly blessed to have you here today. And exciting for you, you had another book released September 5th.
I do.
That's kind of what we'd like to talk about today.
What a coincidence. So do I. No, that's great. Great.
Awesome. So we'll get right into the questions that I have. Paul, in your book that was just released, it's called Leading Through Crisis, which is from your first leadership series, correct? It comes from your first leadership series, first management series. You delve into various types of workplace crises, starting from individual challenges. You have global upheavals, which many of us went through during COVID. So very timely book. Can you give our audience an overview of what inspired you to address these themes and why it's so crucial for HR leaders, business owners to be adept at navigating challenging situations in today's environment?
Yeah, it's a great question, Elena. And there's a little story behind it, but it's quick. So what happened was there was a book called The First Time Manager that's been around since the late 80s. I think it's in its 7th edition, sold 500,000 copies. I mean, this book has really stood the test of time. And HarperCollins recently decided they're going to build a series of books underneath it, like an umbrella. So they asked me to write a book called The First Time Manager HR, which I did. That'll be out in the spring of 2024. And they have the First Time Manager Sales. And they'll build that out by discipline. But they said to me, Paul, the first book we want to do is a book that can pair with all the other books. Like, you pick up the sales book, but you also need the blank book. What would that blank be? And I said, I don't even have to think about it. It's Leading Through Crisis. And they were like, really? And I said, you guys, look, everybody I know is dealing with hair on fire. We're in this, building the plane while flying it phase. Everyone's overwhelmed. Their wires are exposed. We're in this post-COVID reintegration phase, which is really, really hard. Not that COVID was easy. We all know that. But when you put it all together, I think there's a combination of exhaustion. There's a combination of frustration. There are different things in there, but there's not a lot of positives, at least from the people that I'm speaking to. And up until a year ago, Elena, I was an HR practitioner too. So I only opened my consulting firm around the 4th of July of 2022. So it was really, really, it was tough going through COVID. It was just a hard time for everybody. And with the supply chain shortages and the talent shortages and salary issues, and things are moving around so quickly. And you also have your macro issues too. You can't take off the table the fact that, with all due respect, politics are kind of crazy in this country. There's what's going on with the war in Ukraine. There were the concerns about recession and inflation and the pricing. There were the ships backed up in the harbors. People couldn't get the things when they went to Target that they wanted to get. They'd walk into Walmart, shelves were empty. This was all the retailers. But the truth of the matter is, it's going to take us some time to come back to some level of normalcy. In the meantime, ChatGPT has made the scene with artificial intelligence. We're talking about quantum computing. There's so many big, giant tectonic plates that feel like they're moving underneath our feet right now. That to me, my logic was, I think what everyone needs is a book that's going to give them not easy solutions, but fairly straightforward solutions to really tough times, so that we can calm ourselves and in turn we can calm the room. Because in human resources, that's what they look to us to do. So that was the logic behind that book, and lo and behold, it comes out next week. So I'm really excited.
I'm excited and a little jealous that wasn't out when I was in the brick and mortar front line in it, because a lot of people learn how to navigate that through trial and error, which can be extremely terrifying. So that's exciting. I'm so glad and excited for my peers that get that get that book now.
No, that's nice of you to say, and that's part of. Yeah, excuse me. I was just going to say it's part of what's in the book. It's like, when you learn by experience, that's fine. That's how most of us do. But we step on landmines, and you learn by error. And sometimes those landmines can be very expensive to you and or your company. So the logic I had was, look, I've been for 3 decades in the trenches, and why not, as I've done in all my books, let me show you the how. I can be your handy guide and your guiding hand. I can be your coach and mentor to walk you through so many of these crazy things so that you feel comfortable and you feel more confident addressing them when there's no playbook for a lot of this stuff. And that's really the truth of it. What it says on the back of the book is, for all the things that management training has never taught you. And that's the mode that we're in. That's just the phase that we're in these days. So should be an interesting book. I'm excited for it to come out.
Yeah, it'll be great. So thank you so much. Excited for people to have it. So individual crisis and disciplinary, it's interesting because over the time, people are very cautious about, we make this like holding people accountable, really encouraging and getting people on a good track. So in times of crisis, disciplinary actions can be particularly challenging to address. How can leaders ensure that these decisions are both fair, compassionate, but also maintaining integrity and standards of the organization?
Yeah, the logic is, we're going through a really tough time, and it's like when the slinky comes and hits you from behind, it's like, whoa, where'd that come from? I mean, one minute we're talking about talent scarcity and we can't find people, and then just like, I came from the entertainment industry. I mean, major studios are laying off 25% of their population, tens of thousands of people. How could you go in 6 months from we can't find people to we're laying off all of these people? When Elon Musk came out and said he was laying off 70% of Twitter staff, whatever the logic was in doing that, I think a lot of organizations felt they needed to follow suit. And there was this chopping that went on, and we're just in a very strange time. It's just a weird time. But when you think about what are the individual crises, because I talk about, well, there's individual problems, there's departmental challenges, company challenges, and more global challenges. What are the things when you think about individually what can go wrong? The things that really scare people are addressing progressive discipline, terminating and laying off. Those are some of the challenges that you're really going to face. So like everything else, when it comes to the termination piece, I always tell people my advice: terminate early in the day and early in the week. Don't do it Friday afternoon at 5 o'clock. Don't swish people out of the organization like that, like they never existed. People need access to human beings. And as an HR guy, when I terminated someone, whether it was for cause or whether it was a layoff because of a job elimination, I'd always tell people, make me your concierge. I'm here to help you. If you need help with your COBRA application, your unemployment application, if you want me to update your resume with you, if you want to do a role play in interviewing because you haven't done it in a long time, just call me. I'm here for whatever you need. And it's that gentle hand that even when it's a lousy situation, like they terminated me for cause, we're there for the employees. They're also our consumers and our customers. And let's face it, a lot of them worked with us for a long time. Usually people don't do this on purpose. It's unfortunate that terminations happen or that layoffs happen. But to your point too, even when disciplining, I think it's not what you say, it's how you say it. And if
Yes.
people can understand that, we've gone through these steps, and unfortunately, Paul, we're at a point where we really need to put this in writing because it doesn't seem to be registering. And I'm putting it in writing with a full hope that this will turn things around because in most cases, in my experience, it does. And it will, and it could. But again, as an organization, we have to be responsible to the mama ship, right? And we want to make sure that you understand clearly what our expectations are. We think that by putting it in writing, I know it's disciplinary. I know it bites a little bit, it hurts, but the truth of the matter is, we think this is the next step that'll help you turn things around. It's that idea, Elaine, of change your perspective and you'll change your perception. Change the way you look at it. And yeah, it still stinks to be laid off, terminated, disciplined, but people will experience it differently if they feel like it
Mm.
came from a loving hand. I guess that's the best way I could put it.
Paul, thank you, because I see managers get themselves in really bad predicaments because of this fear of how they're going to discipline and how they're going to terminate, and people, it's beautiful and a mess at the same time, right? Because they're very aware of what these individuals are working with and navigating, and to your point, they still have the whoever it is, the boss of the boss, that still, look, we got to get this done, we got to take care of some things. And I see managers freeze up in those situations because they're so afraid of making the wrong move that then they end up making more wrong moves, in my experience. Do you have a situation that you don't mind sharing? Of course, nobody's names or anything, but a situation where you had that could have gone completely south, but because of how you were able to come in and guide that leader, what could have been terrible ended up better for that individual, even after that.
Well, yeah, I feel like I have a million of them. But the funny thing is, Lena, what I would say is, let's take it to the point of termination. Let's take it all the way to the
Right.
point where we had to terminate someone. We had an IT director walking down the row, is in his department, and one of his programmers said to him, "Can I talk to you off the record for a minute?" And the manager said, "Sure, what's up?" And he reached in his pocket and he pulled out a bullet and he said, "No one better bother me today. That's all I'm telling you." And he puts the bullet back in his pocket and he goes back to typing. Now, of course, the manager or the director freaks out and thinks, "Well, I promised this guy confidentiality. I don't know what I'm going to do. So I'm going to run over to Paul Falcone's office in HR." When we receive these kinds of things, it's like the manager made the mistake of saying, "Yeah, let's talk off the record. What do you got?" You can't do that as a manager. Step number one is you've got to put some kind of phrase in there that says, "Wait, I can possibly talk to you off the record, but if it has to do with one of three things, I can't. If it
Right.
has to do with a conflict of interest with the company, if it has to do with harassment, discrimination, bullying, that kind of thing, or if it has to do with potential workplace violence, I can't keep that confidential. I have an affirmative obligation to disclose this." Had the manager said that, it probably would have been better for him and for the organization as a whole. Now, granted, we would want to know this anger. As it turned out, this employee was known as a shooter. He keeps the rifles in the back of his car. He goes to the range every night. He, had to keep his car off the campus because it had firearms in it.
Mm-hmm.
But the bottom line is, when we met with the employee, I said, "You go home." I said to the IT director, "Go home and I'll call the employee in and talk with him." He's called in my office. I said, "What's going on with this threat with banging the bullet?" And I said, "You need to go home. I heard his side of the story." I said, "I will call you later, but I can't promise you that you're going to have a job." And the reason why I'm telling you that right now is just to set your expectations, because the record that you created may have totally taken away our discretion to keep you employed. You know what's going on with workplace violence these days. And companies, if you tell an employee that who makes a threat on Monday that they can come back to work on Tuesday, and God forbid something happens, I'm not saying you would do it, but if someone did something like that, the company would really be on the hook. So go home. I'm paying you for the day. I'll call you by 4 o'clock and I'll let you know what's going on.
Yeah.
I checked internally with our VP of legal affairs and everything. We did have to make the termination, but I can still call him back and educate him. And I said to him, I said, "Just understand something. Companies are so pressured these days when it comes to workplace violence. There's almost zero tolerance for even comments the wrong way. Just promise me that you won't make that kind of mistake again. I know you didn't do it on purpose. I thank you for everything you've done for the last 2 years. And if you need help with anything, I'm here for you. I got your back. Just tell me what you need." That kind of conversation even when someone is fired for cause, for something that, yeah, he lost his head in a minute and it was silly. He shouldn't have done that. He knew better than that. But he was so frustrated, I think he didn't care. But you can still care. As the employer, as the HR person, as the business owner, you can still make that person feel like we're not judging you. We still appreciate everything you've done. But I hope you can respect that we need to move in a different direction because of the record that was created. And that allows people to heal, and that allows people to move on in their careers in a healthy way, even though they don't like what happened. So it's a good example, and I'm glad you bring up that point because that's real. And we have to kind of keep our wits about us in times like that, but make sure that we're still teaching.
Well, thank you. And I unfortunately have had similar situations in my career, but one of the things that I hear you saying, and I've heard this a couple of other times, but when you're interacting, it's with kindness and authenticity. When you're kind and you're authentic, people can feel it. You're leveling with them. You're not sugarcoating anything. You're not telling them something you can't. And people, in my experience, resonate better with that authenticity and that kindness than other ways that I've seen people take that out. I would love to hear a little bit about strategies that you recommend for businesses when they lose key team members during critical phases, right? You have your favorite manager, or you have someone that you idolize as a manager, and all of a sudden they're gone. And it's not only are they gone, but they're gone during their crisis. How would you guide a leader through that?
Well, they have two choices. Choice one is put the covers over your head in the morning and don't go to work that day and just stay under your pillow for as long as you can, because this is, I think, where a lot of people want to go. But the other piece of it, seriously, we've lost the ability as a society to sit around the campfire and pass wisdom from the elders to the younger generation. We just don't do it anymore. We're looking at our iPhones, right? It's a different thing. And the funny thing too, Elena, I'll bring up is when they study the generational cohorts out there, the Gen Z, the 25 and under crowd, right? What they call the Zoomers. Statistically, these are the most isolated, lonely, and depressed people on the planet. It's not the people in the retirement homes. It's the 25 and under crowd because they grew up in this digital technology generation where they don't talk to anybody and their social skills are suffering as a result. They're missing that human element, that human connection. And Lord knows it did not help to have remote work in that sense. Remote work helps with other things. But for the isolated younger ones, the fact that they didn't have access to people was really a problem. And I think that where we're going with all this stuff is, tell me the question again. Wait, I'm going off on a little bit of a tangent, but tell me where we
No,
are.
I love tangents.
Tangents. I'm good with tangents. What was the question on this one?
Yeah. What strategies do you recommend for businesses to
Yeah.
mitigate the impact?
Thank you. So we need
Yeah.
to sit and we need to talk. We need to come together over that campfire. That's why I was bringing it up. And that's what a staff meeting is, or that's what a one-on-one meeting is, or whatever you want to do. We need to sit and we need to talk about these things. Here's how I do it. If I lose someone on my team, and I've been blessed, I've not had a lot of turnover on my teams. If I lose someone on my team who accepts the same job elsewhere for probably the same amount of money, I'm really, really upset with myself because why would I lose someone for that? They're just changing hats. On the other hand, if they're leaving my manager job because they were able to get a director elsewhere and I had no room to grow them into a director headcount, that's something we all have to sit and celebrate. And I think it's that same idea with a family. You sit and you talk about the challenges you have. Now, not all parenting is done that way. A lot of times, sweep it under the carpet. Don't tell the kids, blah, 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 blah. That's not my style.
Yeah.
My style is we sit and we come together and say, listen, with Jeff leaving, and we've only got 2 weeks to do this, you guys. And Jeff, first of all, we're going to celebrate you before we're out because we're really happy for you and this change that's coming your way. So that's coming next Friday night. But for right now, and Jeff, the reason why you're here is we want you to help us take lead in terms of how to divvy up what you're doing now, how to reassign your clients, and how to make sure that this goes as smoothly as possible. Because realistically, we're looking at probably 3 to 4 months before we could replace you. So in the interim, everyone gets a chance to step up. Everyone gets a chance to really take a piece of what Jeff has been doing so well. But Jeff, we need you to help us guide this, and we're all going to figure out how to get through this together. We've got to have each other's backs, and we've got to make sure that the communication is really strong so nothing slips through the cracks. If you have the opportunity, Elena, to do that with the Jeff in this equation and include that person, That's ideal. Sometimes you don't have that. Sometimes they disappear overnight and you don't have that, but you still need to bring the team together, and you need to be a coach. You need to tease out of people. You need to pull out of your employees. What do they want to take on? What do they want to do? What would make most sense for them? I'm not a top-down leader. Sally, you do this. John, you do that.
Yeah.
Keisha, you do that. That doesn't
Ugh.
work. Not in today's environment. Give people a chance, even in that situation, to say, what John does that I'm most interested in is blank, and I'd love to have an opportunity to learn that, and use it as a stretch assignment. And all of a sudden becomes this massive delegation of what that person's responsibilities were, that people can pull into their jobs on a temporary basis to get a chance to really get a feel for it and whether they like it or not. So you can take the lemon and turn it into lemonade very easily. But whether or not you have the benefit of having the employee who's leaving there with you, you still want to bring the family together around the campfire, talk about it. Don't just figure out it's not all the pressure is on you. It's not going to all go to one person. Trust your people enough to give them an opportunity to spread their wings a little bit and take on new responsibility.
Ooh, Paul, I would love to know, in your experience across the board, you've probably seen when that happens and when that doesn't happen. And I'm curious as to how the leader that's communicating that, when they do it that way versus when they don't, what you've seen for them as a leader, like how does that make them more successful? That's
Oh, how does it make them more successful? Well, if they do it that way, it takes the edge off. There's no grumbling. There's no grapevining. There's nothing going, under the line, so to speak. It's all above the line. It's all transparent. We trust each other and we'll get through this. As a leader, you have to let them know, look, we will face worse in our lives. This is not the worst we're ever going to face. Keep perspective, but let's figure out how to do this so that it works for all of us. To me, Elena, bringing your people up to that 30,000-foot view and taking them out of the weeds is important to do from time to time because they need that perspective. Otherwise, especially in today's environment, they feel like ping pong balls. They're just, they're getting battered back and forth. They don't know where to look. And then the resentment kicks in. The reality is, I understand that it's hard. There's no doubt about it. But
yeah.
when we come together from a standpoint of respect, it works. The opposite is the person who then, the manager, who feels like I've got to micromanage everything, I've got to control everything, I've got to take on this person's work now because there's no one else here to do it. Blah 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 blah. Listen, I don't judge. I get it. Sometimes
I
that's the path of
agree.
least resistance. Just do it yourself.
I've heard
But
that before.
but
Yeah.
that's not good because you can't scale your career that way. If you're having that problem because you lost one person on a team of four, there is no way I'm going to give you 40. And you can forget about ever getting 400 people. I'm not going to give you 400 because you're having such a hard time with four. Keep the perspective. Your job isn't, you're not the shell answer man. You don't have to have all the answers. Your job is to teach them to fish. Don't give them the fish. They're adults. Teach them to fish. And when you can do it that way and everyone has a say, it's a shared leadership, it's a selfless leadership, it's a consensus building style that gives everyone say. You won't lose people when they feel like they can do their best work every day with peace of mind. And they feel like they're learning. When you study Gen Y and Gen Z, the 45 and under and the 25 and under, career and professional development is at the top of the chart in every survey that they take. What does that look like? Well, actually, with this person leaving, it's an opportunity to give people some stretch assignments and see where they do for a couple of months. That's an opportunity where, again, it's lemons, but turn it into lemonade for your people. And you'll be surprised. Some may step up much more than you expected. Others may realize what they thought they liked, they didn't like, but that's okay. They need to learn that too. So
Yeah.
just a different way of looking at things. Again, change your perspective and you'll change your perception.
Thank you. In today's ever-changing business landscape, how can leaders, HR managers cultivate a culture of resilience and adaptability? Whew, that was a tough one for today among their teams to swiftly address, right? To swiftly address and recover from unforeseen. Because I remember, I can picture in my head, we had somebody killed in a parking lot and I had to immediately navigate that space. That is traumatizing, right? But how do you, and that's one situation, but how do you help people navigate and become resilient?
Okay, so part of you can tell by now that I'm a teacher. I like teaching this stuff.
Mm,
And that's kind of the value. Now, not everyone is cut the same way I am. But again, study what the CEOs want these days. What are they looking for? And top five for them too comes out to be the same thing. They want agility, they want adaptability, and they want collaboration. So there's one bucket. They want creativity and they want innovation. There's another bucket. They want accountability and blah, blah. You keep going through this, but the studies are all saying the same thing. It is
yeah.
actually good for you if you're a business owner or you're an executive in the corporate setting. Do some Googling and find out, or go to Chat GPT or whatever, and just kind of figure out what is it that they want and how do you introduce these ideas to your employees. So for me, that's the beauty of a staff meeting. Staff meetings for me always occurred once a week with my direct reports. Now, the extended reports, the people who reported to my people who reported to me, I would expect my direct reports to have their meetings with their employees once a week too. Some of them wanted to do it once every other week. I was okay with that. But the pace of business change is so fast that you cannot sit around and not do staff meetings. Again, people tell me they don't do staff meetings because we see each other on the floor. It's not the same thing. That's not
Mm-mm,
what we're talking about here. This is
right.
not your operational day to day. This is the big picture. How do you educate your employees? So talk to them about what are these buckets? What is agility and what does adaptability mean? And how would we score ourselves on a scale of 1 to 10? 10 being we're fabulous, 1 being we're terrible. Where do we give ourselves a score? And go around and people will say 3, 5. I'd give it a 7. I'm a 2, whatever. The first question is, why are you a 7? The next question is, what would make us an 8? But you've got to have those discussions, because when you have those kinds of discussions, it builds a mentality. It's like, oh, I get it. I want this for me as an employee, because if I know that companies are looking for adaptability and they're looking for agility and they're looking for someone who accepts change, they're probably going to ask me this on an interview one day. Give me an example of a time when blah, blah, blah. So this is good for me too. And as soon as management and employees are kind of in sync with why you want to do this for
Mm,
yourself, all of a sudden you're not telling them to do anything like their children. You're kind of coaching them. You're talking about, how do you get this experience here? Whether you stay here for the rest of your life or you stay here for another 6 months, that's not the point. I want for you what you want for you.
mm,
Hey, that's what I would tell my employees. Not I want for you what I want for me through you. There's a difference. And so I tell my employees, again, if we need to focus on being more adaptable, more light on our feet, more open to change, what would that look like for us as a team? And how can we apply it? Let's look back over the last 6 months. Are there opportunities that we maybe could have managed differently? But that's an achievement mentality. The other thing I'll share real quick, Elena, is, to
yeah.
me, I want my employees to live an achievement mentality mindset, lifestyle. Everything should be, what are you doing in terms of increasing revenue, decreasing expenses, making it for better customer service? And can I help you as your manager quantify it in terms of dollars, percentages, or anything else? I want them thinking achievements so they can put it on their self evaluations, on their resumes, and on their LinkedIn profiles. What I tell them I do not want is people who live the comma. I don't need someone who says I do filing, comma, phones, comma, and correspondence, comma. That's your job description. I'm not interested in that. That's what you have to do. I get, but why is it a better place for you having done that? And how can you quantify those achievements? For me, I always used a quarterly achievement calendar. Simple document on the shared drive that everyone had access to, where they can put down their major projects and their next steps and who the stakeholders were. And when that project was complete and they put it on there, we all got a chance to celebrate. It was a beautiful thing. And you know what? It creates that achievement mentality. It's a little bit of an internal competition, which is a healthy competition, in my opinion. And they don't all sit there thinking, I'm the only one who does the work around here. No one else does anything. When they can see it on a document, on a shared drive, they realize all the things that people are doing
Mm.
differently. And that's an easy part of communication too, that it doesn't take them 2 to 5 minutes a week to update. But again, I've got that document ready for my boss to go at any given time. It makes my life a lot easier too.
Ah, what a great way to help peers see each other for their strengths, as opposed to exactly to your point, we only see sometimes what we can see within this little box. and you're opening up the world, not only within the organization, but Paul, what I love about that achievement mentality is I've worked with people who leave a company and they were one of the best employees, but have no idea what to put on a resume because they don't know what they have achieved. They become the comma person, to your point. And we're not comma people, right? Like, we do have impact. And I love that thought of achievement is the impact that you're making. That's phenomenal. Thank you for that.
Sure.
That's great. Company crisis and positivity. So HR professionals, managers, when you're creating a positive environment during company-wide crises, how can you do that? Because I've seen people say, oh, this whole thing is negative, but you talked a little bit about it earlier, which is kind of lemon out of lemonades, but I'd love to go just a little bit deeper into that if you could.
Well, the funny thing is when I came up with the idea for HarperCollins and said leading through crisis, they were like, sounds negative. I said, no, it's not negative. It's positive. Think of it as constructive confrontation, right? You've got to
Oh,
give
yeah.
bad news to somebody who's a top performer, but boy, they've got a bad attitude. Well, you could sit with them and say, you're a top performer, but man, you got a bad attitude. That's probably not going to get you very far. But if there's a way you can position it in a way, Elena, that they can see it in their own best interests. If you can have a conversation with someone, just a real quick example, and say, the most important decisions about your career are going to be made when you're not in the room. And that's the same for you as it is for me, as it is for everybody else. There's something that may be missing awareness in terms of your relationships with your peers and your ability to build rapport that could hurt you in the future if you're not careful. And I can see an opportunity right now for us to partner together where I can help you raise your awareness about that, fix it right here, right now. I'll have your back and I'll make it safe for you to do so that you can influence what's being said about you in that proverbial room sometime in the future when you're not there to defend yourself. In short, what you're doing on the performance side is fabulous, but on the conduct or behavior side, you're really not meeting expectations at this point. And if I'm not hurting your feelings and there's no judgment, if I had to give you a performance review right now, it would say you're only partially meeting expectations. That's why we're doing this 6 months in advance of next year's review. I want to spend this time with you building this muscle, making you aware of something that may not be on your radar screen. But the truth of the matter is, if you can get as strong on the conduct behavior side as you are on the performance side, the sky is the limit in terms of where you can go. I see so much. Sometimes I think I see more for you than you see for yourself. But I'd like to be that mentor. I'd like to be that coach. But even if you don't want me to play that role, I'm okay with that. But my expectations remain the same. You're going to have to create a more inclusive environment. I expect you to model, what I call role model leadership. I expect people to seek you out to benefit from your wisdom and your success. And that's a change in your mindset that I'm going to need you to make to remain on this team and be successful at it. That's the same as saying, boy, do you got a bad attitude. You really need to knock this off. It's the same message. It's said differently. And people can really, that's why I said positivity. You can say it in a different way. When I wrote the book, 101 Tough Conversations to Have with Employees, that was the whole point of it. Look, yeah, sometimes you got to give pretty tough news. But as we know from when we were in the second grade, you will always do your best work for your favorite teacher. It's just the way we're cut, right? Happy cows produce more milk. Become that favorite boss to your employees. And if you can put that in your message, no matter how bad the situation is, oh my goodness, we're going through M&A, our company might be bought. What's going to happen to my job? Or, oh, I heard our employees are talking to the union at the pizzeria tonight. I wonder if they're trying to go union on us. Well, whatever that is, when we wrote the book, the logic was this is meant to give you this is meant to give you the muscle for the stuff that management training has never prepared you for, because it doesn't. Management training, it teaches you what, but it doesn't show you how. And my books, where I think I've been successful with my books, is I filled a niche to say, this is how to do it. This is how to open up that can of worms when you have to have a tough conversation. This is how to interview. These are the types of questions you'll want to ask, but here are the responses to get if you're interviewing a salesperson versus a recent college grad versus a C-level candidate. It's the how that's really the differentiator, in my opinion. And when people have that, they feel more confident. I'm not saying use the words exactly like I put them on paper, make them your own. But the best compliment I can get, Elena, is when someone says, Paul, it was like you were a fly on the wall. The conversation just went like it did in the book. That's not because I'm a soothsayer. I don't know where the future lies, but I do know that people tend to respond in fairly predictable ways when you approach them in a respectful tone, but still with high accountability. It's both. The respect is there, but the accountability and the high expectations are there as well. So you can do this all in a sense of spirit of positivity. And then just think, pay it forward. Are you growing more leaders? Are you the guy or the gal that they say, put Falcone in there in 3 months, he'll turn that place around so quickly, they'll all be singing like hummingbirds, right? That's what
Yeah.
you want. It's that ability to build strong teams, build camaraderie. I call it turnaround leadership. Put someone in a really tough situation,
Mm.
and they're going to get the best out of people in a fairly short amount of time. And that's probably the best skill you can have these days in a leadership career path.
I love that turnaround leadership. It's so needed, and kind of an under observed skill for a lot of what I love too, Paul. You have this is the how in the book, and when you gave the example of you talking to that employee that had struggles, you are also handing them a how to. Right? Somebody tells you you're not doing your job, and they walk away, and you're thinking, "Oh, okay, so what now? Like, what do I do?" And you feel like you're floundering. So I love that those resonate together that way. That's great. Thank you for sharing.
Sure, of course.
Global crisis. So COVID changed a lot of things, right? One of them being more people were interacted with the global crisis that was happening, right? Things that were
Right.
going on. And there's going to be a consistent increase in that. How can they navigate that emotional toll and maintain, because that people are dealing with their own emotions as they're watching and seeing. So how do you
Yeah.
help them navigate that?
So Elena, there's different ways to look at it. So I had written an article for SHRM. I'm a columnist for SHRM, and I had talked about this idea of making it safe for employees to talk about non-work related stuff. Now, normally I would say never. I kind of cover the nope. If it's private, But the difference is in today's world, there's so much coming at us in so many different directions. People can't leave it at the door. Okay, they're bringing it into the workplace. It could be the politics, it could be the global warming, it could be the gun rates
Yeah.
that are going on out there. It is the workplace meant to be something to address things from their personal lives. People may disagree and say, no, I don't agree with that. The answer is no. And I can respect that because up until a few years ago, that was my answer too. Where I've changed though, and with my last team, you can feel it sometimes. The tension is so heavy. And I would call a staff meeting and I'd say, you guys, I'm here just to check in. We're allowed to talk about things. Now, listen, there's a few rules. There's nothing about red hats and blue hats. I'm not talking about any of that stuff. There's no political blah, blah, blah. I need to know how you're being impacted, number one. Number two, if I can help. Number three, if the rest of the team can help, because we've got to have each other's backs through these difficult times. Now, my last job, Elena, I was the Chief Human Resources Officer for the Motion Picture and Television Fund. I worked there for 5 years. They're a healthcare nonprofit. And in Southern California, they're fairly well known. It's the retirement home for the people from the entertainment industry. And they wanted someone with healthcare and entertainment. And I had both because I worked at City of Hope earlier in my career. And if you remember, COVID started in a retirement home in Seattle. I mean, that's where it first landed in the country. We lost residents and we lost patients and we lost employees. It was really, really tough. And when it's that intense, you can sit together with people and say, let's just check in and see how we're doing. You guys, again, I've got your back. I want to make it safe for you to share as much as you want to. Now, these are small group meetings, right? I don't do this in front of 500 people, but with my direct reports, which is usually no more than usually 4 to 6 people, they can do it with their extended teams. But for me, I do it with just my people. I just want to make it safe for them to be able to say, I'm exhausted. I'm frustrated. I can't turn the TV on anymore. I feel totally overwhelmed at work. From there, someone can say, you know what, I think I can help you with that one thing. Give people an opportunity to help each other. That's what's missing. It really is. We come from a society where there's not a lot of accountability anymore. I hate to say it, right? But even I won't mention any names, but a professional baseball team cheated in the World Series several years ago, and they still got to keep the trophy. I mean, it's really frustrating, and people feel like their values are being taken out from under them. I can't fix all that, and they know that. but even just to come together quietly, to be able to talk as a team and say, you guys, we need to take it down a little bit so that we can all exhale, that we can let our shoulders down. To the point that you feel comfortable, let's lighten it up a little bit. We need a little bit more enlightenment in here because we all feel this burden of what's going on right now. And I want to make sure that most important, we're taking care of one another. That's just my style. Not everyone is going to believe in that. Not everyone's going to have that style. But I'll tell you what, even if someone didn't feel comfortable sharing anything in that meeting, they would still say, I really appreciate, Paul, that you took the time to hear from us because it means something to people. Final thought for me, Elena, is this. When I do my exercises, whether I'm doing management training or I'm teaching at UCLA and I'm in the classroom, I'm like, tell me about your favorite boss. And don't tell me who it is or what company. I just want to know, what were the characteristics? What made that person your favorite boss? And they raise their hands one by one. Well, she really seemed to trust me. She made me feel like I had a seat at the table. I always felt like my opinion mattered. I was included. Great. Next student. Well, he challenged me to do things I didn't even think I was ready for. He seemed to have more faith in me than I had in myself. Great. Next student. Well, he cared so much about my education. It was because of him that I went back to get my, whatever,
Yeah.
my bachelor's degree. My question to them is this. Are you describing the person's beingness or their doingness? In other words, it's both. Are you describing who they are or are you describing what they did? And I really want you to think about this, but talk about it out loud. And usually the conversation says, well, it's their beingness. It's what they did. That's what made me feel good about myself. Okay, keep talking and blah, blah, blah. And then sooner or later, someone comes up and says, well, wait a second. I think we're talking about their beingness, not their doingness. It's who they were. Bingo. That's the answer. To be a great boss, to be someone's favorite boss, it comes down to two words: caring and character. If they feel like you care about them personally and they feel like you're a person of high character who they respect and they can go to and they can make themselves vulnerable in front of, they will stay with you through highs and lows. They're not going to go somewhere else for 15 or 20% because there's a risk that they're going to end up working for Godzilla, who spits fire and throws chairs. I was
Yep.
lucky. I didn't have a lot of turnover on my teams, but you have to make it safe for people to do that. And when you're in that kind of environment and they kind of get the message, it's like, wait a second, it's their character and it's their caring. I could do that. Uh-huh. Now I'm growing the talent myself. Maya Angelou, the American poet, was the one who said, people won't necessarily remember what you said and they won't remember what you did, but they'll always remember how you made them feel. And that's the core of everything that I write about. It's being that influence on people's lives, no matter what kind of tragedy you're facing, including pandemics, including, to your point, an employee who was killed in a parking lot. These are heartbreaking things. People say, how do you write all these books? I said, believe me, I'm not that creative. I can't come up with all this content. It finds me, right? Because when you're in human resources, these are the stories that you get. The only difference for me is I like to turn it into storytelling. And that either found its way in the form of an article, or after enough articles are written, I turned it into a book. That was my hobby on the side. But the reality is, we are that leadership resource for people when times are high, when times are hard. They look to HR as the soul of the company. It's the CEO, of course, but if you think of a department, who's your culture? Oftentimes, the default is it's our HR team. So how does HR project that? How do they define themselves relative to this idea of being the proxy for the culture of the organization? It's interesting. It's good. It makes for good conversation, that's for sure.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Paul, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for what you're doing and guiding teams out there and creating space. I just love to hear the stories, but thank you for creating the books to help managers and leaders. And thank you for giving them the how-to give them confidence to you just said it, to be the leader, to give them the leadership tools on the go and on the fly. Thank you so very much. Super excited for what you continue to bring and place at the table. And again, everybody, if you haven't had a chance, check it out. Paul is amazing. He's got so many books out there, so you can pick one and then continue and put them on your reading list. But Paul, thank you so much for your wisdom and thank you for sharing. And I look forward to more conversations with you. And thanks for showing up today.
Thanks, Lane. My pleasure. By the way, if anyone wants to connect on LinkedIn, I'm just Paul Falcone 1. So feel free to send me an invite. It'd be great.
Yes, a great place to connect. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Elena. Bye, everybody.